The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight, why teenagers have more to say about this election than you might expect. Then, Aaron Kelly returns with new data from Polly, the artificial intelligence pollster, and a look back at the life and legacy of Aga Khan IV. That's all ahead on the agenda. With Doug Ford calling a snap election in Ontario, youth across the province are not shying away from making their voices heard. Amidst an affordability crisis and threats from Donald Trump, members of Gen Z, or Z, are here to explain why it's important to be politically engaged, even if some of them aren't even old enough to vote. Joining us now for more, we welcome, in Kitchener, Ontario, Adam Foley. He's 16 years old. With us here in studio, Sarah Mora. She's 17 years old from Richmond Hill. Leah Chang is 17 years old from Toronto, and Jaden Braves is 16 years old, also from the provincial capital. And it's great to have you three here in our studio. Adam, glad you are there on the line for us from Kitchener. Leah, I'm going to put you to work first here. Why do you think people should care about this provincial election, particularly if they're not even old enough to vote?
Well, I really think that young people, even if they're not old enough to vote, are really facing the problems and the issues that are coming with the policies that are at our provincial level and even at our federal level. And I think even if they can't physically go and vote, I think that advocating for the issues that we really care about, things like education, affordability, employment, housing, are really essential to having our voices heard and making sure that we're actually seeing the effects of these policies.
Adam, what would you add to that in terms of why young people, even if you can't vote, as you cannot, should still be engaged?
I'd say that even though we can't vote, that doesn't mean we're immune to the ramifications of the decisions made by our politicians. Just because we can't vote doesn't mean we should be ignoring what's happening in our provincial and government policies.
Sarah, what would you add to that?
I think just to echo what was already said, I mean, young people are key stakeholders in all these issues, and not to mention that the policies that are affecting the current society we live in are going to trickle along to the society that we then inherit once we are old enough to vote and are involved in these processes. So it's essential that we care, it's essential that we're involved, and it is essential that politicians care about what we have to say about these issues.
Just before I ask you a question, you know, I get to wear a t-shirt on this show 2 days a week during the writ period, and I notice you have a t-shirt on today.
What do you think?
Does that need any explanation? I don't think it does, actually. So you don't like the idea of Canada as a 51st state. You prefer the example of America as the 11th province. Is that it?
Well, I mean, Steve, it's just so ludicrous. Like, ludicrousness must have ludicrousness met with it. And so, you know, we got shirts for everyone. We'll just do. But I'm hoping you'll take this on too. You know?
I will definitely wear this on the On Poly podcast before the writ period is over. I think that's great.
Isn't that phenomenal?
Where'd you get these?
I printed them.
You did?
I printed them just downtown. Merch made, it was just the best store across from Harvard Collegiate. Go get your stuff printed there. But 24 hours ago, I was like, this is a great addition we need to have this year.
Okay. Now that we've got the wardrobe issue all figured out here, what do you think about the fact that we're having a snap election in the province of Ontario? First winter election in 44 years, and 17 months before we were scheduled to.
Well, it's not great for canvassing, for one. For two, I look around at my peers and I see a generation that's struggling and scared for the things that we're going to have to inherit. Those are things like a $30 million investment to break free of the climate action we've already invested, a $2 billion deficit in our education, which is limiting the resources and faculty we have in our schools. And that's things like $189 million of Ontarian taxpayers' money, our money, which we're going to have to pay back through taxes in the coming years in order to make sure Ontarians can get $200 to nearly buy a vote for the next election. There's a reason they're every 4 years in Ontario for our province. There's a reason we have elections, and they're not to be cut short in order to keep our greed.
Who here, I guess probably you too, right? If the election were held in June of 2026, when the law provided for it, Would you be 18 by then?
Yes.
You would be. So you would have been able to vote. Are you ticked off you can't vote now because of the early call?
I mean, definitely. I mean, I've even applied to be a poll worker on election day so that I can kind of live vicariously through those who are actually voting. But I think it's really disappointing for young people, especially those of us that are in high school, university, working jobs. We're actually facing the same issues that many people who are able to vote are facing. And it's just quite disappointing that we're not able to voice our issues and our perspectives in this election.
Sarah, say, well, you would have been 18 by next June?
Yep, I would have actually, I'm turning 18 this May, and I totally agree. I also applied to be a poll worker.
You two are desperately nerdy, aren't you? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
All
we
right,
are.
yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree. I mean, there's a feeling of helplessness. I think that's definitely something that I've been feeling and something that people around me and my peers have been feeling. When you see all that's going on and the fact that we're in a crisis and you can't do anything about it, and it's very hard to cope with that fact. So you try to get involved as much as you can, but when you see that you've been kind of, disenfranchised, as you said.
Is that the word? Yeah.
Yeah, from a process that you would have initially been involved in to begin with, it's very frustrating, yes.
Let me get Adam on that. Adam, do you think, now I'm not sure, you would not be 18 before June of 26, right?
I would be, yes.
Oh, you would be. So do you feel disenfranchised by the early call?
Frustrated, yes. I don't think disenfranchised is the correct term. I feel like there's no reason he would have called an early election, and it's frustrating to see this happening. But again, I don't think it's a move done out of spite or bad intentions, simply trying to gain some popularity by playing the fear of Trump off of people.
Adam, you're far too reasonable. Disenfranchised is a big, angrier word. You're being far too reasonable in the way you describe things here. That's your personality. That's okay. That's okay. What about you? You would not be old enough, right, to vote?
No,
regardless.
not for a long while. I think I'm plenty involved. I mean, we're leading a national organization that's job is to bring young people in democracy. I don't think I could be more involved. And
what's the group called?
Young Politicians of Canada. Thank you for letting me plug it here. But hey, become a member. It's free. I think the point is we're not included in the dividends of these decisions. So whether we claim, or rather politicians, whether they're claiming we're going to be affected by them, we're not seeing the actions manifest that. I think it's very easy for us to take into account what somebody's going to say on a camera and say, oh, that's going to be the reality, that's what's going to be implemented, but then they're not implemented. And then I think we have to take a look around and say, okay, well, who's actually going to lead that change for us? I've been active in various parties and various candidates that I think are ready to take on that change. And unfortunately, we see some of them, and then at the same time, sometimes they're limited.
Well, having so many young people on this program right now gives us a good opportunity to find out what you guys care about, and to see whether it's any different from what people my age care about. So, Adam, why don't you start us off? You are 16 years old. You live in Kitchener. What do you care about in this campaign?
I'd say, in my somewhat biased opinion, education would be the number one priority to me, as I'm still in high school, hoping to go on into university. Seeing budget cuts and cuts to funding is very concerning for me. And
are you hearing things? I'm sorry. Are you hearing things about either the high school education system or the post-secondary system from any of the parties right now that interest you?
In general, no, which is unfortunate. I'd hoped there had been some push to revert some of Doug Ford's changes, though I don't see any party pushing that issue.
Revert the changes. What changes are you talking about?
General budget cuts to schools that he had proposed early in his first term.
Gotcha. Okay. Leah, how about you? What would you like to see that may or may not be discussed in the campaign so far?
I would definitely agree when it comes to education, even on the secondary and post-secondary level. Just speaking anecdotally here, I mean, the majority of my classes are upwards of 900, 1,000 people, and I just question...
We should say, even though you're 17.
Yes.
You're in university already.
Yes, I am.
You have 1,000 kids in classes?
I do. And I just kind of question whether that is the best learning environment for students. I mean, introductory classes are meant to give you a base for what you want to go ahead and study in or even make change in the world. And I just don't really think it's conducive to students who truly want to learn. And even if we look at things like OSAP or employment, I don't think that young people are really in a position to thrive in this current climate.
You're at U of T?
I am.
Where do you have a class that can seat 1,000 people at U of T?
Well, actually, most of my intro classes are in Convocation Hall, which is where the graduations are held. It's not made to be a classroom, right? There's no desks. It's just chairs one next to another. And I don't think it's really conducive to learning or thriving.
What do you want to hear?
So I completely agree with everything that Leah said, and even just speaking on things such as OSAP, I'm going to university next year, and I will most likely be applying to OSAP, right? And
OSAP is the Student Assistance Program, so
Yes.
you either want a grant or a bursary or a loan or something.
Yes, and currently there are interests on those loans, and that's something that Bonnie Crombie's party is interested in getting rid of. They want to get rid of loans, they want to get rid of the interest on these loans and make the threshold for repayment higher to, I believe, $50,000. And these are positive changes, but at the same time, we have to question why was there interest on these educational loans in the first place? And just generally speaking, I mean, the NDP wants to invest $830 million into school repairs, and it's supposed to I believe the goal is to fix all of the problems within schools in Ontario by 2030. These are all very important. I mean, education is the starting point. It is how we equip ourselves to succeed in life and to get a job and to function in our society. I think that it's something that more of the party should be focusing on in depth.
Gotcha. Jaden, what are you looking at?
I think we got to look at the full picture. I think we have to look at youth unemployment rates. We have to look at the cost of tuition. We have to look at the insecurity in housing amongst young people, which is horrifying and getting worse by the minute. And then we have to say, is this the Ontario that we want to grow up in and actually have? Is this an Ontario that we're proud to live in? Unfortunately, some of it's incumbent upon the federal government when we look at the limited infrastructure that we have to support some of the immigration and job changes that we were creating. We haven't implemented C56, which is the Sustainable Jobs Act, nearly as much as we should have. We haven't taken action on Youth Climate Corp, which would have created thousands and thousands of jobs for young people in green sectors and innovating. So we're left with 17.8% youth unemployment rates. And at the same time, we have $9,400 average tuitions in university, which is the largest out of any province in Canada. At the same time, 17% of young people in this province are insecure about having a roof over their heads. And I'm not saying, they don't know how they feel about it. I'm saying they have a risk of not actually having a roof over their heads. This is not an Ontario that young people deserve to have to grow up in, and it's actually up to us to change it.
Adam, you're in high school now?
I am, yes.
Do you, as
Starting
you,
my second.
yeah, as you take a look around your school or around your class, do you see evidence of a lack of investment in the public school system?
I don't personally use public schools.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Tell us about what kind of education you're getting.
I'm going to a French Catholic school currently, and I have seen similar issues there. We had planned renovations that we've had to cancel. We have had to add more portables. We've had classes exceeding 36 students. It's generally not a wonderful learning environment.
Right. The French Catholic system would still be a publicly funded system, though, so you are definitely experiencing, I guess, what you would consider to be the lack of adequate investment in the publicly funded school system of this province. Fair to say?
That is true, yes.
That is true. Okay. How about you? Are you in first year university right now?
I am.
Okay, so you just got out of high school. Did you see evidence of a school system that could use a little more money?
I think definitely, especially when it comes to learners who have needs that go beyond what a typical teacher can offer. I saw so many students who they simply didn't thrive in the environment that was being provided, and I don't really think that there's enough support for young people with disabilities and people with disabilities in general. And something positive that I've actually seen is that I believe that the majority of the parties in this election are campaigning on doubling disability support, which is important.
Well, not the progressive conservatives, but the other ones are. Yes, that's right.
I also wanted to add on to what Jaden said. I believe the only party that has mentioned youth employment is the Liberals. They've proposed tax credits for businesses who give internships and paid internships to young people. I believe it'll create 40,000 jobs for young people, but I really don't think that it's a conversation that's being had enough, right? The majority of the parties aren't talking about it. And what I've seen a rise of lately is unpaid internships and unpaid jobs where young people are essentially being asked to work for free just to get quote unquote job experience. And you know, these people are at the top of their schools, their universities, and they're not even being paid minimum wage for what they're doing.
You know, I don't know if we have any conservatives here at our literal and figurative table online, but you know, the Conservative Party federally has seen a pretty significant uptick in support, particularly from young people. And I wonder, do you hear about that, Jaden? Are you hearing from your colleagues and friends and so on that
Yes.
we like what conservatives have to say nowadays?
I am hearing that, Steve, and I think it's really interesting. Can I call it a phenomenon? Maybe. It's rare that you have a large group of young people across a country believing that a conservative party is the way to go. That's generally rare amongst young people. We are supposed to be the progressive ones, and then older generations typically bogging us down a little bit, and there's that dichotomy. But right now it's changed, and it's shifted predominantly because there's promises around affordable housing and affordable economy where we can take our first step into markets and succeed as adults that we don't really feel that we're getting right now. And I use the word feel because, you know, objectively, it's really hard to say if we do have those opportunities and compared to a generation prior. But I think what we can look at is this absolute pessimism that we're feeling in society in Canada. Whether that's to blame the government, whether that's to blame social media and us getting 40% of our news from TikTok, which is driving us against each other, and algorithms that are devastating us so much to be channeled and fueled by hate, which Pierre Poilievre is dedicated to proliferating all over social medias, while paying other organizations to do the same and to make sure those messages are being spewed, which are radicalizing young Canadians. Those are the concerns that I have, and that's what I think is driving this trend. But I also notice it's not young people. I speak to a number of adults, you know, your age-ish, and they seem to tell me they're just as radicalized, maybe they say it a little bit differently, but they're describing their news being given to them in the same formats, driving the same reactions, which is this pure hatred against the system that they think is totally broken and doesn't work. And I ask myself, well, first of all, a lot of the facts are wrong. And second of all, is that actually what's happening, or is this a dogma, a rhetoric that's being fueled in order to drive Canadians against each other and try to support an organization or an individual that doesn't actually have what's best?
Okay, I'm just inferring from that answer that you probably are not a conservative supporter. Just a wild hunch.
Good question. You know, I like policy. I don't like talking about strict party lines. I think we do that a lot in the United States. I think Canada does not do that. Canadian values are looking out for each other and liking policies and not people and parties.
Okay. Sarah, how much conversation goes on among your peer group comparing and contrasting what the different parties have on offer?
I think that my peer group would be particularly inclined towards politics. So I can't say that it's an accurate show of most young people. I do think that right now a lot of young people are very interested in what is going on. They want to see a party that is going to deliver them change. And kind of building off of what Jaden said, this is our future that we are looking at right now. And when you are seeing on a federal level such an unpopular government at the moment, a lot of people will look towards a different government, a change, as a means of solving their problems. Regardless of if we believe that they're going to solve our problems, it's a way of comforting ourselves, I think, because there are so many different problems right now. Youth unemployment, as Jaden mentioned earlier. There's the mental health crisis. There's so many problems within our educational system. There are so many problems regarding the climate and healthcare. We do not want to inherit a world that is on fire. So we are looking for change and some kind of hope, and usually looking towards a different party, a different leader, gives us the illusion that there will be that positive change to bring us a future that we deserve. But I do think that we need to look more closely at what these people are actually suggesting and look closely at what that will mean rather than just, oh, this is us against them. It's one side of the spectrum or the other. You need to work together to find proper solutions to an ongoing crisis.
I get you. Let's get Adam in on this as well. Adam, when you're talking with your peer group, do you do much comparing and contrasting among the different parties and what they have on offer?
As of recently, yes. We've been, in the long run, no, but seeing as we're staring down the barrel of many different geopolitical things, we're potentially losing our most reliable ally. There's been definitely a lot of talk and many different perspectives about who would handle that, and of course the many other issues we've brought up so far. Who would handle them best, who we think shouldn't be in charge. A lot of interesting discussion.
Adam, I know when I talk to my peer group, a lot of us are pretty angry at the United States right now, or at the president in particular. How about in your age group?
That is absolutely the consensus, yeah. When I said there's lots of opinions, that's the exception. No one's agreeing with Trump and the states on that particular issue.
Got it. Leah, how about in your peer group? Much discussion about Trump, tariffs, relationships with the states right now?
Well, Steve, I think maybe the only positive thing that's coming from these tariffs is I'm seeing really a renewed sense of unity amongst Canadians, among young people, and people are really crossing partisan lines and saying, look, we disagree on certain things, we disagree on policies, maybe even on fundamental ideology, but we agree that what's happening right now is not going to happen, and we think that what the States is doing is not fair, and we need to protect Canada. And I think that we really have a unique opportunity to maybe capitalize on this unity and say, why can't we go forward this way? Why can't we speak across partisan lines and work together to actually fix the issues that Canadians are facing?
Now, you know, of course, Doug Ford is running in this early election campaign because he says he needs a fresh 4-year term to match Trump's 4-year term so that he can represent Ontario well. What are you laughing for already? He's in Washington. He's actually in Washington this week doing all of that. So how's that sitting with you?
I mean, I think I would agree with the majority of Ontarians in saying this election is largely unnecessary, right? Doug Ford has a majority in our legislature, and we really think that his existing mandate is enough to fight these tariffs. And I think young people are really talking about it's a really interesting time for him to be calling an election. I mean, the government, the Ontario government, has invested over $100 million, even just in the last fiscal year, more than any year before, in advertising. And I think many young people, what I'm hearing amongst my friends and my peer groups is, couldn't all of that energy, the people, the money be invested into young Ontarians and Ontarians in general?
Jane, do you see increased patriotism or fervor because of what Donald Trump is trying to do to Canada?
Patriotism, somewhat. I think some of the statistics are quite shocking. I mean, again, we're not the 51st state. We will never be the 51st state. We will never be. It sounds just as crazy as the United States being the 11th province. So, I mean, I can be a little bit more frank. When we were down in D.C., we were speaking to the prior admin with President Biden. We were speaking to Trump's incoming team. We were at the White House. We're talking to NATO. But I think the most important aspect there is we heard exactly what it'll take to stop these threats. We need to reach our 2% NATO GDP spend. We need to make sure we're imposing tariffs on shared competition. Those are competitions like China, like Russia, and we're implementing the same tariffs as the United States is interested in, and we're working with the United States. We need to be able to engage more diplomatically with the U.S. and actually have meaningful discussions, even if it's with people we disagree with, to make sure we can have takeaways that benefit this country and not work against them. Don't add counter tariffs. It's not going to work.
Well, we'll see. But I guess, Sarah, I'd follow up with you by asking, do you think all of this foofara with Donald Trump has, do you see signs that it's increased patriotism or political engagement among your age group?
I definitely think that when you see the president of one of the greatest powers in the world at the moment saying that he is going to annex your country and make Canada the 51st state, and then threatening us with all of these tariffs and everything like that, it really makes you question what kind of respect he has for us. And it's when you hear something so jarring coming from such a great power like the U.S., I think it does bring unity, like Leah said. And I think it should, because I think for a long time there's a lot of division amongst Canadians politically, and I also think that we need to kind of reassemble our national identity and our what we stand for. I do think that it has caused a lot more engagement amongst youth. Like I said, when you hear something like that, you know that you need to pay attention. It's not something that you can take lightheartedly, especially in a time like this.
Jaden, has any single one of your friends said, well, maybe we ought to look at this?
Yes.
Maybe we ought to look at being the 51st
Absolutely.
state. You have had friends say that.
I am hearing this. This is why I'm concerned. And this is why I come back to, it is the most pointless, silly trade war, if you want to call it a trade war, we've ever seen. It is ridiculous. It is unnecessary. It is wasting our time and our energy and our thoughts. The world is burning up into a crisp. We're going to have a really bad wildfire season. We're going to have a really bad continual war against the actual countries like Ukraine and Russia, or what's going on in the Middle East that we're not engaging with nearly as much as we should. And right now we're talking about tariffs between Canada and the United States. What are we, children? We are, but is Trump and Trudeau? It's ridiculous.
Well, in fairness to Trudeau, he didn't start this. Adam, how about you? Are you hearing any of your friends saying, 51st state, maybe we should look at that?
Not really, in all honesty. There's, again, I've seen a lot of national unity, as has been stated. No one much seems to think that we are the 51st state. There's the idea that why should we be the 51st state? We've been our own independent, fully fledged country for 150 years, or 42 if you count it by when we got our constitution. But still, the point stands that we're practically indistinguishable from the United States in many ways.
Okay, we've got a few minutes left here, and we got to talk about the elephant in the room. Okay, kids? Okay. Here we go. You guys don't vote.
Uh-oh.
The politicians don't listen to you because you don't vote. You don't vote in numbers commensurate with your percentage of the population. Mm-hmm. Why not?
I think that there are many reasons, but I think the two main reasons are, firstly, I don't think young people have the proper resources to understand, first of all, who to vote for, how to approach policy. And I feel like politics seems so daunting, so...
You guys are smart. You know how to go to websites and read about the policies that all the parties have on offer. It's the easiest thing in the world to do. Mm-hmm. So why don't they?
Yeah. I really think that it comes down to, it just seems too daunting and too separate from us. I'm not speaking for us, obviously, but for many young people, I feel like politics seems like this huge thing that's so separate from us. But if you go ahead and ask young people, do you care about social issues? Do you care about employment, about housing, about education, even about truth and reconciliation? They'll say, hell yes, but they just don't
Doesn't translate
understand
into going to the polls.
How to dissect these policies and kind of see through what politicians are saying versus what is actually going to be put into practice. And I think the second thing is, especially for young people who are engaged in politics like us, burnout. The mental health challenges that come with having to fight for a seat on the table, having to fight to be heard, while also balancing our lives, education, jobs, trying to find a job after we graduate. And I think for so many young people, it just seems too daunting to be involved in politics. It takes too much time, too much effort.
Sarah, why don't you guys vote?
I could agree, but In terms of voter turnout, or in terms of why me as a 17-year-old, why don't I vote?
Well, I've only just met you, but my hunch is the first chance you get to vote, you're going to go vote.
Yes.
But I don't think I'm going out on a limb by saying a lot of your friends are not going to vote. They don't feel a need to vote. They
Right.
feel the parties are all the same. They don't feel the parties are reaching out to them, even though I see evidence of it all the time, that they're putting policies in the window that should appeal to you.
I think that the reason that there's been lower voter turnout amongst young people is because 18 is not an optimal time for us to start voting. And I think that
What would be better?
for a few reasons. I think 16 years old is a much better time for us to start voting. And there have been many cases of this. I mean, Austria was the first nation in the developed world to lower the voting age in all elections in 2007, and it worked very well for them. I think that 16-year-olds are definitely mature enough, and I think there are so many people pushing, such as one of the lovely organizations that myself and Jaden work with, Vote 16.
Vote 16.
Yeah, we work.
You want to get that for municipal elections, though, is that right, for starters?
Well,
All over.
Yep,
encompassing.
all over.
We have a council bill. We have a motion, DM 23.6.
23.1?
23.1, thank you.
Let's argue about what number the motion is. No, I'm kidding. No, it's obviously 16, old enough to drive, get behind the wheel of a car,
Yes.
should be old enough to vote. That's the
Yes,
idea.
exactly.
Okay. What's the chances of that happening?
Well, the city council clerk's going to put forward a report, which we're going to work on implementing with
Which
council.
city?
Toronto City
Okay.
Council. Sorry, not to be Toronto-centric, everyone. We're not the only city in Ontario. But the point is, we are advocating across the country because it's breaking our constitutional rights. In Canada, we have a constitutional right to vote. We as in Canadian citizens. I'm a citizen, you're a citizen, I should be able to vote just like you should. I'm 16 and I'm limited by virtue of an age because I'm not considered just as much of a productive or contributing member of society as you, which means maybe I won't be as much of a productive and contributing member of society. And as soon as we start recognizing that, we will start seeing that innovation and leadership coming out of young people. But because we're not, and because we're not even considered just like anyone else, it almost feels we're so belittled, but we're just as capable.
Let me get Adam in on that. What would happen, Adam, do you think, if we change the voting age from 18 to 16?
I feel nothing much would change, which is why I think it's strange that we haven't done it yet, or it hasn't been a large motion. The only major change would be that 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds, of course, would feel like they have more of a say in what's happening in their government, which I see is entirely positive. We've discussed how we feel disenfranchised or frustrated by why we can't, or how we can't, contribute in our government, and changing that would pretty much reverse course for most of them.
You know what I've always thought, and I have no idea if I'm right about this, but I always thought if you gave 16-year-olds the vote, they would bring their parents to the polls, and their parents, who might not normally vote, would vote. Maybe in some cases for the first time. It's
true.
Because you guys are the leaders of tomorrow. Don't think I don't know it. I want to thank all of you for coming into TVO tonight, both actually and virtually. Adam Foley, I look forward to further conversations with you when you actually can vote. When you're 18 years old, that is, unless, of course, you get the vote before that. And on my right here, Leah Chang, and over here on the left, Jaden Braves and Sarah Mora. It's great to have all of you on our program tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Time now for a check-in with Aaron Kelly, CEO and co-founder of Advanced Symbolics, Inc., to find out what Polly, the AI pollster, has to say about the state of the race so far. Always good to have you in that chair, Aaron.
Great to be here.
Well, of course, with the election being called 16, 17 months early, in the dead of winter, I'm hearing from lots of candidates that nothing's going on out there, right? People are not home. It's too cold for campaigning. What are you picking up online in terms of engagement levels?
Believe it or not, because I thought the same thing. I thought people were checked out of this election. The engagement is higher this period before the election in this election than it was in 2022.
How does that make any sense?
Well, people are online talking. Maybe they're not opening their doors. Maybe they don't want to talk to the candidates. That's possible. But they're definitely talking to each other and having lots and lots of debates about how the province should move forward, what the issues are, and what they would like to see.
That is very encouraging. What are the top issues that people are talking about?
Tariffs, and not just tariffs, but how Ontario's economic future and economic development. Healthcare, of course, but that's a minefield. Public safety and infrastructure. So there's actually a lot of issues and a lot of deep discussions in all of those.
Infrastructure, as in, should we build a highway underneath the 401 or a tunnel under the 401?
Infrastructure, as in our infrastructure is crumbling. What should we be prioritizing? Feeling that the priorities haven't been where people want them to be up to date. That we need roads, not spas, not luxury places. A lot of those conversations. So yeah, in each of those topics, there's lots and lots of conversation taking place.
I know Polly is very sophisticated as an artificial intelligence thing, but is Polly able to disaggregate information, as in, here's what people in Northern Ontario think as opposed to Eastern, as opposed to Southwestern, as opposed to... Can she do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
She can.
Yeah.
So are there differences, depending on where you live in the province, on what you think the key issues are?
Yes. Yes. So if you're in, say, the GTA, infrastructure is really important. In rural areas, we're seeing, in addition to tariffs and economic development, we're seeing that's where the public safety, because they don't have they feel the ambulances and the firefighters and things like that in rural areas that they need. Healthcare as well, of course, and access to it, but different needs than what you see in the city. So yeah, there's different conversations happening in different parts of the province and among different demographics as well.
Let's look at the leaders. Do you pick up stuff on Polly which suggests, yes, Doug Ford is good on this, but not so good on this? And what are the this and this in that case?
Doug Ford specifically?
Yeah.
With Doug Ford, it's experience, basically political experience. The fact that he's been there, he's been through a crisis before. They see him as competent at managing crises, and that's a lot of what we're seeing today. So just for him, it's not any one thing in particular. It's many little things that he's doing, and especially in this campaign that's getting him ahead.
Does he have an Achilles heel that you're picking up?
He has many Achilles heels.
Okay.
So it's a polarizing thing. So depending on the topic, so healthcare is an Achilles heel, and many different little topics in there, such as long-term care, acute care. There's lots of those things. I would say that's his biggest Achilles heel.
Do you pick up a desire by the public to increase significantly the amount of money we're spending on health, which is north of $80 billion a year already? What are you hearing?
No.
Really?
Yeah, it's a very so healthcare. And that's why I mean it's a minefield. So even something like doctor shortage, right, which a lot of the candidates are campaigning on, only about 65% of people feel that we have a doctor shortage, which maybe the candidates would be surprised at that. A lot of people are saying we don't want to throw money into a system that's broken, because then it becomes an endless pit.
Throw good money after bad.
Right, yeah, exactly. So fix the system. And so we're hearing people say things like, use the right healthcare professional for the issue you have. Like if you're a healthy 25-year-old, do you need a doctor, or do you just need somebody who can run regular tests to make sure you continue to be healthy? And
Nurse practitioner might do the job.
Exactly. Or people saying pharmacists, all that kind of thing. People want to do more home health care. They want more. People are saying, look, the doctor's office hasn't changed since like the 1980s when they remember going there as a kid. That primary care physicians aren't investing in new technologies because the system doesn't really incent them to do that. And so we're not seeing that progression. And so fix the system so that we get better technology, more efficiency, and better use of healthcare practitioners before you decide to just keep throwing money into it.
This may be an obvious question, but is there a relationship between how much money you make and the party you tend to support? As in, do better off people tend to vote Conservative and less well-off people tend to vote, I don't know what, NDP, Liberal, Green? You tell me.
Well, there's a trend, but it's not that one.
Oh, okay.
It was interesting. So NDP and the Green Party are, especially, so Mike Schreiner is skewing the highest on income. And interestingly enough, those people like him because of his advocacy for for the poor.
So he's got the bleeding heart liberals on his
He's got
side.
the bleeding heart liberals.
Okay.
And then Marit Stiles also trending in people who make between 150 to 200,000 household income. And then Bonnie Crombie and Doug Ford are fighting over that middle class, with Doug Ford doing somewhat better with young people in that middle class than Bonnie Crombie is.
Younger people leaning conservative is a fascinating new trend, isn't it?
Yeah, we see it in the States. We saw it here in the past provincial elections as well, young people voting for Doug Ford. In this case, he's actually courting them quite well because he's talking about the stimulus package, which appeals to young people, right, that want those jobs.
And federally, Pierre Poilievre was
Yes.
picking up a lot of young conservative supporters.
Affordable housing, and they're getting in not through mainstream media, but through channels that young people listen to.
Doug Ford put a baseball cap on and it said Canada's not for sale, and he was on the front page of all the papers and got a great deal of attention, pushing back against this notion that we're about to become the 51st state. How much has that bolstered his appeal among voters?
Not a lot, not in terms of the vote. It got a blip when it happened, when he did it, but compared to other things, like his experience and leadership, it didn't have a big effect.
So that was a moment.
It was a moment.
But it passed.
It was a passing moment.
Interesting. Okay. We are, I guess, we're more than halfway through the campaign right now. Not much time left for the opposition parties to try to change the channel, if that's going to happen. Maybe it won't happen. Does Polly point to anything, I don't know if it's an issue or if it's a strategy or whatever, that the opposition leaders could do in order to get people to take a second look at them? Because at the moment, Ford's in first place in every polls and looking like he's going to march to the finish line pretty easily.
Yeah, and we see him going that way as well. So for Bonnie Crombie, we're seeing a lot of people are feeling that she's a lot like Doug Ford. I mean, she doesn't have her own brand. She's a fiscal conservative. She says that. There's not enough distinction there. So if she were to come out, for example, she's gone strong on healthcare, tackle some of what's less, we're seeing less conversation about the innovation in healthcare. She could really forge a path for herself there by saying, I'm thinking differently. She needs to think differently because people are saying, well, she's sort of Doug Ford without the cronyism kind of things that we're saying now, without the RCMP investigation hanging over her. So they don't see a difference in her approach or her beliefs or her values. So she needs to parse that out again a little bit more. And Marit Stiles, it's really amplitude. People who know her like her, but she's in an echo chamber. She's not reaching, we have a metric that we call new voices, are new people talking about you. Bonnie Crombie is reaching new people, but Marit Stiles is in a little bubble.
Does the leaders' debate on Monday night, televised province-wide, present a significant opportunity to change the narrative of this campaign, in your view?
Yes, especially possibly for Marit Stiles, because right now we see a lot of the people that are talking about Marit Stiles are already NDP supporters. They're getting their information from NDP sites, from NDP channels, and she's not getting out of that. So I think the debate will have hopefully a good opportunity for her to reach a new audience.
And just in our last 30 seconds here, the mainstream media and the way they have covered the campaign, what impact?
Well, that's interesting because when we looked at Bonnie Crombie, for instance, we saw that where a lot of people were referencing mainstream media articles about her from the Toronto Star and various places. But when we looked at Marit Stiles, a lot of the information that they got on her platform came from NDP sources. We did not see a lot of engagement. Now, I don't know if that's because she's not getting the airplay on mainstream media that Bonnie Crombie is. Maybe her team is not as good at getting out there, or the articles aren't interesting enough for people to talk about them. I don't know what it is, but like I said, she's in that bubble and she's not bursting out of it. Bonnie Crombie seems to be getting a lot more airplay, or maybe using mainstream media much more effectively.
Well, debates are usually the moment in the campaign where people start to really focus a lot more, and they do present an opportunity, and we'll have the debate here on TVO, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday night. I hope people watch, as I hope they watch you, Aaron, whenever you come in here. Thanks a lot for making the trek from Ottawa.
Thanks, Steve.
The death of Prince Karim al-Husseini, or Aga Khan IV, as he was better known, has led to an outpouring of tributes. The spiritual leader of Ismaili Muslims, more than 80,000 of whom reside in Canada, was known for his philanthropic efforts around the globe. Here to reflect on his legacy, Arif Lalani, former Canadian diplomat who also led the diplomatic department of His Highness the Aga Khan. It's great to have you back here.
Thanks very much.
Although, as they say, on better occasions.
Well, it's an honor to do this, though.
Well, he had such a stellar life. I'm glad we could get you to come in and talk a bit about it. And just for those who don't know enough about him, let's put this on the record, shall we? Bring this fact file up, if you would, please, so we can talk about Prince Karim al-Husseini, who was born December 13th, 1936 in Geneva, Switzerland. In 1957, at the age of 20, he became the 49th hereditary imam, or spiritual leader, of Shia Ismaili Muslims, a position he held for almost 7 decades. The title Aga Khan is derived from Turkish and Persian words to mean commanding chief. Ismailis believe that the Aga Khan is directly descended from an unbroken line of imams going back to the Prophet Muhammad. Now, in 1972, Canada became an important focus for this community when Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau welcomed more than 6,000 Ismaili refugees from Uganda who had been expelled by the dictator Idi Amin. Today, out of the 15 million Ismaili worldwide, more than 80,000 call Canada home. And in terms of honors, in 2005, the Aga Khan was made an honorary companion of the Order of Canada, and in 2010, he received honorary Canadian citizenship, which is something that the number of people, I think you can count on the fingers of one hand, have received over the years. Help us understand, put it into perspective, the Aga Khan's death and what it means to the community.
Well, it's obviously a huge loss for the community, but at the same time, there's continuity. The Ismailis believe that there's always a living spiritual guide. So the chain is unbroken for them. His son, Rahim Aga Khan, was named right away as his successor. So there is mourning, but there's also rejuvenation and a time of fresh hope with a new, young leader who I think will give fresh hope, not just to his community, but I think beyond.
I'm going to come back to him later, but if I can use a comparison that I think more of our viewers would understand. Is this like the death of Queen Elizabeth II?
Well, it's funny you mention that. I think there are no two other figures in history that share so much in common in terms of the personal situation. I think they were leaders globally at around the same time. So it's similar, but it's not. I think His Highness the Aga Khan was a singular figure across 2 centuries, because I think no one leader has a mandate for the spiritual well-being of people and also for their social and economic development. Think about it. He was there with President Kennedy right through to President Trump.
Pretty amazing.
He was there at the at the end of the Commonwealth as we knew it then, the time of independence. He was there for the height of the Cold War. He was there for the dismantling of the Soviet Union. He was there for the information age. All of that was one leader.
He was also there for you. Sheldon, bring up this picture in the middle of page 2, if you would, because you took a leave of absence from your government work to work for him in 2016. And there it is. What a shot. That's a pretty stellar cast right there. Okay, what did you do for him?
Well, he gave me the privilege of serving as the head of his Department of Diplomatic Affairs, which essentially meant supporting him in facilitating global relations around the world. So the Ismaili Imamate, which is his office, had relations at the level of treaties and international agreements with about 13 countries, Canada chief amongst them. And he asked me to come and help kind of take that department to a different level for a few years.
Let's get more personal. Do you recall having a private moment with him where he said something to you that stayed with you?
Look, there were many private moments. I think I need to keep those private, but what I will tell you is, you'll see it in all the pictures. He has this smile, you see it. His Highness the Aga Khan IV always had this smile, which made you very comfortable. And I think he partly did it because he realized, the weight of his presence in any room. I traveled with him. We went to about 11 countries in 12 months for his Diamond Jubilee global trips, where he was received by heads of state everywhere. And even they could feel, that they were in the presence of something extraordinary. And I think he found that if he smiled right at the beginning, it was comforting. I'll also tell you, he had a spiritual side, but he was also essentially a CEO of one of the largest development organizations in the world. And he was a tough CEO.
For example?
He was tough on the budget. He was very tough on outcomes. I remember he said to me once, I had done a memo for him, and he sort of very politely sort of pushed it back and said, well, there's nothing executive here. And
what
he
did that
said,
mean?
there's nothing for me to take a decision on. Oh. He was very outcome oriented. We didn't spend a lot of time on policy papers. We spent a lot of time on what's the outcome? How do we help people? How do we find solutions?
Did he ever take you to the woodshed?
Yeah, certainly.
How would he do that?
He was always polite, but it was always clear, It was always clear. It was always clear.
Well, he was also, I guess, one of the rare international leaders who got on quite well with many of our prime ministers, regardless of party stripe. And let's show some pictures. There he is in 1972 with Pierre Elliott Trudeau. That's our current prime minister's father on the right. And he was a pallbearer at his funeral as well. There he is in 1985 with Brian Mulroney. So Mr. Mulroney is prime minister at this point for only a year or so. And then in 2014, there he is with Stephen Harper. And the smile is omnipresent in all of those pictures. Talk about, if you would, the bond that he clearly felt he had with Canada.
There's a very special relationship with Canada. I'm here because of that bond. I was in Uganda in 1972, and our family left with nothing. And we came to Canada. And, His Highness gave advice to his community. And the first thing he said to us, and repeated, and it was very simple, make Canada your home. That was the phrase. Every Ismaili family understood we were to make Canada our home, we were to be citizens, and we were to be contributing citizens. And I think the community's done that fairly well. And Canada, provided an environment for somebody like me to come with nothing and then represent my country. And that relationship was across all prime ministers. It was Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau for sure. But as you pointed out, it was Prime Minister Mulroney who opened one of the first Ismaili centers in the world here in Canada.
Well, and if you want to talk legacy, you can go 15 minutes east of the studio and see the Aga Khan Museum, which is one of the truly, great marvels of architecture and beauty in this whole country. What did that place mean to him?
That was a very personal passion for him. He believed very strongly that people misunderstood Islam, and that when you said Islam, there were certain images that came up, and he wanted to change what those images might be, to show that Islam is, like the other religions, a place of beauty and
let's take a look.
culture.
Sheldon, bring it up if you would. Yeah, oh my gosh, look at that. Beautiful picture, reflecting pool, architecturally quite marvelous. And how many times have you been in that building?
Many times. I was there for the opening with His Highness and Prime Minister Harper at the time. And there's a park attached to that museum as well. And he had a vision of having parks around the world. And so there's Al-Azhar Park in Cairo. There are parks that he has donated in India. There's a park he's donated in Alberta. And together, I think they welcome about 5 million visitors a year.
You talked about the fact that the succession is in place, and I think we need to understand better about how that works. Okay, Rahim al-Husseini is going to take over for him. Was there any question that he would be the one to take over?
Well, it's a divine mandate, so it transfers from one imam to the next. And certainly the imam who designates knows, and nobody else knows until it's done. So I think there's not a lot of speculation. There's just trust. This happens.
I mean, is it
happened.
automatically the firstborn who takes over?
Not necessarily.
No?
Generally, it has been, but it's been continued for 1,400 years. And
There he is. There's a shot of the news. So his title will be?
So he is His Highness Prince Rahim Aga Khan V, and he is the eldest son of his father, and I think he will be every bit as singular in his time as his father was.
I guess he's had some on-the-job training over the last many years, knowing this day was inevitably going to come.
Well, he certainly has. I don't know if this day was going to come, but I think he has always understood the obligation and duty that the family has. So all the members of the family are involved in one way or another in the works of the Aga Khan Development Network, and he certainly has been at the forefront of looking at eradicating poverty, environment and climate change, and also economic development.
Does it have to be a male who succeeds the Aga Khan?
Well, when His Highness the Aga Khan IV was asked to this, he had said it would be a male. So I can't say more than that.
And what expectations do you have for the new Aga Khan V?
Well, I think the expectations on him generally are large. Imagine he has to be the spiritual father to 15 million people. So, he's responsible for their spiritual well-being, but he's also responsible for their worldly, economic, and social well-being. So I think the expectations are large, for sure. The burden is heavy.
Burden is heavy, but does he intend, there's usually two ways to do these things, continuity or shake it up. Which do you see?
I think every imam has built on the foundations of the previous one. And I think what his father was known for was to meet the challenges of a changing world. And I think Prince Rahim Aga Khan certainly is now leading at a time of a changing world. So I think he will have to help not just the community, but the communities in which the Ismailis live, so the countries in which the Ismailis live. I think he will help them navigate these times.
Gotcha. That's Arif Lalani, former Canadian diplomat with the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, and also a guy who had a front row seat to much of what Aga Khan IV did. Arif, good to see you again. Thanks so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
And that is the agenda for Thursday, February 13th, 2025. Tomorrow on the program, John Michael McGrath and yours truly are back with our Friday edition of On Poly, including a look at Doug Ford's trip to Washington. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.